So for this week on Cyberschool, we're talking about security in SIP and just VoIP in general. With the advent of hosted platforms and more people switching to the use of hosted platforms, especially with work from home being so prevalent, security in your phone system is super duper important. Whether it's just physical security around, say, your server room where you're going to have your actual server system, or the actual endpoints that you're using, your desk phones, your soft clients, your Ring Central meetings, or products like your CyberData outdoor intercom or your paging adapter, all should be secured when they're doing anything on the phone system to help prevent any kind of toll fraud or any potential would-be aggressors or hackers from gaining access to your system. So what kind of security is available when we're dealing with SIP and VoIP in general? Of course, you've got setup message encryption, or SIP, the session initialization protocol, which is what we use to actually generate these different phone calls. You can encrypt those specific messages, basically who you're calling. Then you can also, honestly, encrypt the important part, the actual audio itself. And then finally, you can also encrypt the provisioning templates, and that's the actual credentials, the user information, for lack of a better term, to actually register your equipment with the phone system. So when you get your account with Ring Central or Zoom, they're going to provide a set of credentials, so that way you can use your desk phone. And that desk phone is going to get all that stuff from Ring Central in an encrypted manner. So that way, as it passes across the open internet, it's all encrypted. And if anybody were to intercept that data, they're not going to get anything with it. So that's basically the three different things that you can do in terms of security with SIP and VoIP in general. So why would you want to consider something like this? Well, of course, hosted platforms are becoming a lot more prevalent with just the advent and kind of the way that everything is going, with especially everybody being working from home now being such a popular thing that everyone is doing in the last 2 years. It's becoming a lot more prevalent to actually host your phone system in the cloud, as in a hosted platform, quote unquote, instead of having it say on premise. Those are becoming less and less prevalent. They're still out there and a lot of businesses use them, but they're less prevalent than they were. So since all of your data, whether it's your setup messages on who you're calling, the actual audio traffic for your call, and then just the setup information for your phones, all of that is going across the open internet, so it should be encrypted. And hackers just are becoming even more desperate, as we've seen with the big hacks that have gone across, of course, the United States with the pipeline, all the different companies that are getting ransomware, and then, of course, all of the big calls that everybody's been getting recently, whether it's the Social Security fraud scams or your car warranty scams. Everybody's getting those different scam calls, and that's all from hackers going and gaining access to the systems. And specifically, those two latter ones, the Social Security fraud and the call warranty scams, are all done by a method known as toll fraud, where either somebody can go and hijack the credentials used for your phone and register their own phone with it and use a bot to make calls with those, or they can send different stuff to your phone and actually take over your phone and generate calls, basically acting as your phone, turning it into essentially a little bot. That's not as prevalent and harder to come by. The more common way is where they can actually hijack your credentials. And as we go through and we talk about the different methods for encryption, we can talk about different ways to prevent that kind of thing from occurring. So when we're dealing with call encryption, this is going to be most useful to prevent people from listening in on a call. And this is going to encrypt both sides of it by using a feature known as TLS, which actually goes and encrypts the setup messages, who you're calling, so that way you're protecting, say if you're calling, a big, say you're Elon Musk and you're calling the board of executives at Twitter, because, they just signed the offer to allow you to buy the platform, you might not want everybody to know that you're calling them. So all of those specific setup messages to call Twitter are going to be encrypted. But also, honestly, the important part, the audio, what you're actually talking about when Elon Musk is celebrating and telling everybody, hey, you've got 2 weeks left because I'm firing the entire board, all of that's going to be encrypted as well. So with call encryption, you're encrypting both the setup messages for the actual call and the audio itself. And this is going to use a very basic style of encryption, which is just a shared encryption key. So when the actual SIP messages are sent across, they're going to share an encryption key for the actual audio itself. And then they're going to share the encryption method that they're both going to use. And both the endpoint, say your CyberData device, and the server itself are going to support a whole bunch of different cipher suites, basically different ways to handle that encryption. And they pick and choose one that they both have in common, and they share that key together. So that way they just use that simple form of encryption between the two. And the nice way on doing it with this style of very basic encryption is there's little to no impact on the actual speed of your call, because encryption wouldn't be that good if you're talking and it would take 5 or 6 seconds for whatever you're saying to get decoded on the other end. It would be a whole lot more secure, but it wouldn't make for a very good phone call. It wouldn't really make sense. It'd be more akin to, like, say, using a walkie-talkie, where more people just want that full duplex two-way conversation, like you're sitting around somebody and you're having a chat. So that's why they use kind of a basic style of encryption. It's not as secure as other encryption methods out there, say like end-to-end encryption that you can get with emails or things like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, actual iMessage from Apple. All of those things are going to use end-to-end encryption, where basic encryption used in SIP calls is good enough, and it gives you that confidence that the messages that you're sending back and forth are all going to be encrypted with little to no worry that your stuff is going to get intercepted and somebody can spy in on your call. Still theoretically possible, but pretty unlikely. So as we move on to provisioning encryption, the other big style of encryption that's super duper important when you're dealing with your SIP phones or your SIP devices, this is going to encrypt the actual transmission of the login information. Essentially, when you create an extension for your device on a different phone system, it's essentially going to give you a user ID and a password. It's a little bit more complicated than that in terms of the actual credentials that you can get, but for conversation's sake, your phone gets a username and password. To use RingCentral, to use Zoom, to use WebEx, what have you, they all get a set of basically a username and password. And these different files are passed to the device, typically using some kind of encryption. A lot of the times, they're going to use a protocol known as HTTPS for that actual file transmission. And this is the same thing that you'll use, say, when you're connecting to your bank website, you're connecting to PayPal, or most websites now. Most websites are going to require an HTTPS connection, especially with most web browsers that you're using. So it's a very common style of encryption that you've already used that works really well. It's kind of the industry standard. And that encrypts it from the server, sending it to you. And then if you have to send anything back to the server, that's going to be encrypted in that manner as well. There's an additional step that you can kind of put a cherry on top of additional certification based on that, on top of that HTTPS, and that's known as certificate-based encryption or validation, where the server is, during this HTTPS handshake, where the server wants you to validate who you are, they can actually request a certificate from the device. And the server can go and check this certificate because it's signed by someone, say maybe CyberData themselves, or an actual certificate authority. And the nice thing is the device can actually do the same thing. So the server can say, hey, your password checks out, but give me your papers, please. Show me your papers. And they do that, and they validate that we are who we say we are, but then we can also turn around and do the same thing to the server and say, okay, Mr. Server, I provided my credentials, my paperwork to you. Show me your paperwork. So that way both sides can authenticate each other and make sure that they are indeed who they're talking to. And this is really, really important for somebody that might be doing what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack to potentially get, say, your different login information. They can kind of get it that way, or they can actually get the credentials as it gets passed through the network, because they'd be kind of in the middle, playing that keep away game. They go and they grab it in the middle and transmit you something else and steal all of that information. But using that certificate-based encryption, you know that you're talking to the right party because they've got the certificate for proof of it. So it becomes super duper important when you're passing any of the style of provisioning information to an actual device to have all that encrypted, because honestly, that's the more important part. Because if somebody goes and steals your login information, they're going to start making calls in your account, and they're going to jack up that toll fraud, and you might even get in trouble if they're making car warranty calls on your account. That might get your phone provider mad at you. They might shut off your service. A whole bunch of bad things can happen. So provisioning encryption is really important if the devices support it. So what does CyberData actually support? Now that we've kind of covered the different ways for encryption and dealing with security and stuff, what does CyberData do? Well, we support call encryption, and we support, of course, SRTP, which is used for the actual audio transport. That's kind of the industry standard, and that's just the term for it, and it's either on or it's off. You have kind of a middleman mode where we'll use it if the other party will use it or they won't use it, but generally it's kind of like an on or off switch. You're either encrypting stuff or you're not encrypting stuff. But also, you're going to want to use TLS 1.2 for the actual SIP transport. That's your setup messages. So that way, both who you're calling, Elon Musk calling Twitter, and Elon Musk telling that he's going to fire everybody on the board, all of that can be encrypted using something like TLS 1.2 and SRTP for the actual audio. But we also support some of the more depreciated standards for TLS for some older systems. There are very few out there that use it still, and that would be TLS 1.0 and TLS 1.1. Those really aren't used that much anymore because they're very easily cracked, meaning that somebody can just go and run a program and actually crack all that stuff that's encrypted and turn it unencrypted and be able to read it. So it's not used very much anymore, but there are still some older platforms out there that'll use it. So we offer it as an option. But if you opt into any of this kind of security, it's always going to use TLS 1.2 and SRTP just as standard. And then for actual provisioning setup, we've of course got HTTPS, so that way you can download all of the certificate or the provisioning information securely. But we also have the option for that certificate verification. So that way the server can verify who we are and we can verify who the server is. And that's all really easily done in there and really protects all of the sensitive information that might be transmitted through the cloud or even just on your local area network. And these are the different tools that CyberData has available for the style of encryption. So in summary, encryption and SIP, it's really there for your privacy protection. So that way you're protecting when you're talking to different people, whether it's just a small call to mom, you're calling mom on, your work phone, she's having some medical issues, she's talking to you on her way home from the doctor's office, or you're making these big high-level C-level calls where you're Elon Musk calling Twitter and you just spent $44 billion on a company. Any level of protection, any level of privacy that you want out there, you can get by using encryption with SIP. And it keeps those private conversations secure and private. It keeps private things private, which is super duper important when you're using any kind of communication protocols that are going to be going across the open internet because people are trying to get any kind of traffic they will. And then, of course, since it's going across the open internet and anybody could potentially have access to it, you want that to be encrypted. So that way, if somebody does somehow gain access to that stuff between transmission between you and that phone system or you and whoever you're calling, it's going to be encrypted. So that's another step in prevention to them actually getting and understanding what you're talking about. Because if they get that encrypted data, they still have to figure out how to crack it, and they probably have no idea how to do that. And the good thing is it keeps the hackers at bay and it keeps them looking at other people. And a lot of the times when you're dealing with these different hackers, they get one or two deterrents from, oh, here's this person. They've got, a system. Let me try to hack into that. Oh, they're encrypted. Oh, all of their SIP calls are encrypted and their audio is encrypted. No, I can't go for them. And they're just going to pass on and go to somebody else. You're going to keep them at bay by just doing these very simple things, just to go and encrypt your actual call traffic and the phone setup itself. And just those little deterrents will help protect you in the long run. And it's super duper important, as I'm sure we've all experienced it when we're in different meetings or it's at the weekend that you're at home and you're getting those calls where, oh my gosh, congratulations. We found that your car still has the capability to extend your car warranty. Please press 1 to talk to us now. That's all a scam. And by going and encrypting your phone system and preventing people from getting access to that, you're preventing toll fraud, which can help to keep you from getting those calls and help keep everybody from getting those calls. So just by doing the very basics to go and encrypt your system to prevent people from spying on who you're calling, what you're talking about, and how your device is being set up can help protect your system, keep hackers at bay, and help prevent toll fraud.
Thank you for watching this edition of CyberSchool. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.